The Secrets of Doctor Who is brought to you by the Star Quest Production Network and is made possible by our many generous patrons. If you'd like to support the podcast, please visit sqpn.com/give. You're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, episode 228.
One day, I shall come back.
That's it. I've been renewed.
Is when a Time Lord's body wears out, he regenerates.
I'm a Time Lord. I'm not a human being. I walk in eternity.
Bravehearty.
Change, my dear, and it seems not a moment too soon.
Unlimited rice pudding.
Physician healers. Wearing a bit thin. Fantastic. I am Scottish. I can complain about things.
Ta-da! Ooh. Should be fine.
Hi, I'm Dom Bettinelli, and you're listening to The Secrets of Doctor Who, where we discuss everything about the hit BBC series, Doctor Who. And today we're discussing the 11th Doctor story, The God Complex. And joining me today on the panel are Father Cory Stika. Hi, Father Cory.
How's it going, Dom?
Very well, thanks. And Jimmy Aiken. Hi, Jimmy.
Worst episode ever.
Since the last worst episode ever.
That's just Jimmy's opinion.
This is the worst episode ever.
It's not necessarily, well, actually, it's my opinion too. So,
yeah.
I was going to say, I don't know if it's worse, but it's down there. Anyway, before we get to the very entertaining discussion of how bad this episode is, let's remind the listeners, be sure to write an Apple Podcast review of Secrets of Doctor Who if you can. We really appreciate that. That helps us a lot. And to share the podcast with your friends, help us grow our community of listeners, reach more Doctor Who fans. All right, so let's get into it. Let me give you a recap of this episode, and then we can talk about why we variously do not like it. The Doctor and Amy and Rory are headed to another planet when they show up in what looks like a 1980s hotel on Earth. They encounter 4 people who tell them that it's a labyrinth with no exits that also reconfigures itself randomly. They tell them that there are rooms with fears in them, and everyone has a room with a fear dedicated to them or a fear personal to them. Once you find your room, you start involuntarily worshiping the creature that lives in the hotel, which is a Minotaur-like creature that comes and kills you once you are worshiping it. One by one, the humans they've met are killed off, while the Doctor figures out that it's not fear that the creature feeds on, but faith, and the fears are what make people fall back on their faith. And just in time, the Doctor figures out that it's Amy's faith in him that makes her vulnerable, so he breaks her faith. The creature is allowed to die because it's always wanted to die. It doesn't really want to kill. And it reveals that the hotel is an alien prison that had been created for the creature. In the end, the Doctor drops off Amy and Rory on Earth because they're no longer going to be regular companions, and to save them, and he goes off alone back into the universe.
So, an overall downer of an episode.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah.
And interesting, well, we'll get to the leaving them as companions at the end, but it's an interesting fake out that they're doing here on this.
Well,
so
I did discover my greatest fear watching this episode. Having to ever watch this episode again.
Yes, we've done it. It's done. We're not doing it anymore.
It is a Toby Whithouse episode, which I think we kind of generally don't like what he produces. I would say that's a fair generality.
I'd say Vampires of Venice was better.
Mm-hmm.
His best is School Reunion, where Sarah Jane Smith comes back.
Yeah, I forgot that he wrote that one. So,
yeah.
But he's also got some real stinkers. Like
A Town Called Mercy. Ugh.
Yeah.
So Toby Whithouse seems to have this idea or this recurring theme in the ones he writes about the Doctor leaving companions to save them. He just seems to really like this idea. I know I said we'd talk about the end, but since we're talking about Toby Whithouse. So that's an interesting thing that keeps coming up in his writing. I just thought I'd mention it here. But let's talk this episode itself. It has overtones of The Shining.
Oh, yes.
And the Overlook Hotel in The Shining. It's the Greek myth of the Minotaur and the Labyrinth, although in this case, it's not Icarus and his dad.
Daedalus.
Thank you. Flying close to the sun with the wings to escape, so on and so forth. So that's really, it's a what if the Doctor encountered the Minotaur in the Labyrinth sort of situation.
Yeah, so let me start by praising this episode, because if it weren't for a couple of things, this would actually be good. This has a bunch of effectively creepy stuff. The Shining is the Shining references are there, and The Shining is a very creepy movie, and this is creepy. It's well made in some respects. The problems are on the conceptual level primarily. It's not on the craft level. Right. The dialogue is reasonable. There are some funny lines in it. The overall idea of you're trapped in this evil hotel, and people are dying one by one. I mean, that's all fine. And so on, and there's a lot of individually creepy things. Like there's one character named John who's tied up, and the doctor says, "What's he doing?" No, he's tied up. He's literally tied up. And when they go see him, he's tied up in like not a ballroom, but like a dining room, and seated at all of the tables are these mannequins, these dummies, ventriloquist dummies. And ventriloquist dummies are creepy because they fall in the uncanny valley. And these ones, are just laughing for no reason. And then they all stop when the characters come in and their heads turn, and you hear the wood creaking as they turn their heads.
Especially creepy.
That's all effectively creepy. So, that on the craft level, this is just fine.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I would, the ventriloquist dummies that move on their own is at the high level of everybody's creep factor. Yeah. Well, another thing I liked was of the three people that the four people they encounter at first in the hotel, there is this Rita. She's although it's sort of, I don't know. I have a problem. Well, she's a medical student, I think, and she's a medical student who's ethnic. I think probably of
Pakistani origin.
Pakistani origin, yeah. Who is very capable when the doctor first meets her. That sounds very familiar, doesn't it? Like, why are we recreating Martha Jones? It's very strange. And she's very capable. The doctor immediately wants to take her on as a companion, which we know, of course, dooms her to die in this episode.
And one of my memories from the first time I saw this, I've seen this like twice now. I saw it when it first came out, and I rewatched it for this, and I was very actually tempted not to rewatch it for this once I got into it because I hate it so much. But I then said, no, okay, I'll stick it out. Someone has to warn the children against this episode. But one of the things that stuck in my memory from the first time I saw it was, as soon as he meets Rita, the doctor says, "Amy, with regret, you're fired." And I didn't like that.
No.
Later, there's a reference. She says that she thinks that her theory of what's going on, because the characters they meet have different theories about what's happening, and her theory is they're in hell. But she uses an Islamic word for hell, and the doctor says, "You're Muslim," and she says, "Don't be frightened." And that was a little ambiguous to me. I mean, I get the humor. This was not too long post 9/11.
Right. Decade.
And for a Western audience that had been victimized by Muslim terrorism, it was even less after the British 7/11 attacks. That's something that actually... that line I have some sympathy for, because if I were a Muslim in Britain and people were scared of me just because I was a Muslim, there would be an impulse to say something like that. At the same, and it's kind of got a mix of authentic human emotion there, both on the part of the person saying it and on the part of the person hearing it, but it's also played, ostensibly for comedy. And we do find those situations in life where we say something that's true as if it were a joke, as kind of cover for being able to say an uncomfortable truth.
Take the sting out is probably the that's true. Yeah, there is, like you said, there is some good lines, some good dialogue, some bits in here and there, but it doesn't cover for the flaws.
I also there's a character who looks kind of like a mole man. He's from the planet Tivoli, which is the most invaded planet in the galaxy, and so his race is built around surrender.
Yes.
Yeah. They will surrender. They have a compulsive need to surrender to everybody. And their national anthem is "All Hail the Conquering, insert name here." And one of their current projects on their planet is to line their roadways with trees so their conquerors will be able to march in the shade.
Yes.
And you know, this is a clever concept. It's completely unrealistic, but it's clever and it's funny. And in another episode, I'd be happy to learn more about these people.
Yeah, and although it's interesting, the one thing I like is how Whithouse writes it, where the Doctor says that the surrender aspect makes people overlook that the surrender isn't cowardly; it's sly and aggressive. You know that there's this that Gibbous, I think his name is, uses this fear, this wanting to surrender, as a way to push others ahead of them, sort of, you know, push other people off the cliff before them to hide behind his fear and his cowardice, that sort of thing,
and to protect themselves at any at any cost. I mean, at the cost of surrendering, but it's not surrendering for the sake of, oh, we're just going to give up and lay down. No, it's like we're going to protect ourselves by path of least resistance for us,
right? And he's the one who ends up causing the fourth member of this group that they encounter, Howie. He basically causes him to die by releasing him once he's been infected. And so I should mention, so we have the nerdy paranoid blogger Howie, the doctor Rita, and the alien surrender monkey Gibbous, and Joe the gambler, who is the first guy they encounter. And when Joe dies, so we don't see what the Minotaur creature does to people. We just know that he kills them, and there doesn't seem to be visible wounds. And the doctor says there's no cause. All his vital organs simply stopped, as if the simple spark of life, his loves and hates, his faiths and fears, were just taken. And that's where I start to encounter one of my problems with this episode is like this idea, the mechanism by which the creature feeds and kills. This like it feeds, like it doesn't seem to make any sense. This feeding on faith, and that it has to transfer the faith to itself, and it's really weird.
And it's such a loose sense of the word faith, at least as we would understand as Catholics. Yeah, it's more of a sure
confidence,
support, confidence. Yeah. That's a good word. Because the kind of one of the parts of this episode surround Amy losing her faith in the doctor. Right. Well, that's not what we would consider faith. That would be a strong confidence.
Right. Relationship.
But, yeah. And by the way, we've seen that before.
Yes.
Where the doctor has made a companion lose her faith. Right. It was Ace with the Seventh Doctor.
Yep.
They were fighting off vampires
from the future.
And faith, it wasn't like, and there's actually a line from that episode where it's not the crucifix that keeps vampires away, it's the faith of the person holding the crucifix.
Except in the real vampire novels, it is the crucifix itself. It's not the faith of the person using it.
Right.
But the doctor wants this vampire to come in, and Ace's faith in the doctor is keeping the vampire away. So he destroys her. I mean, it's like you're a worthless child, you're nothing, and just absolutely destroys her faith in him. So it's the same basic plot, though.
Yeah.
So we're kind of jumping to one of my main criticisms of this episode, but I'll save my comments on that for later. For the moment, I don't mind the fact that the people just die.
Mm-hmm.
That part of it, you find earlier in the episode where someone has been infected by this weird psychological state, and then they just end up dead. And you have this buildup of this thing is coming for them, and then suddenly they're just dead, and there's no apparent explanation. I think that works on the horror level. I don't, as a horror viewer, I don't need an explanation for exactly how this is happening. When they try to give us one later in the episode, that's where I have problems with it. But I think it might help if we talked a little bit more about the mechanics of how this happens. And they clue that to us at the very beginning of the episode, because we see somebody from a previous cycle in this hotel. Her name on screen is Lucy Hayward in the original script, and she's like a police officer. And she has been infected already. She's the last one of her group to succumb, and so she's holding out on her own, and she eventually does succumb, and we see how that happens. In the script, her name was Lucy Miller, and they changed it because Lucy Miller is a famous companion of the Eighth Doctor, Paul McGann's doctor, in the audio plays. Lucy comes after Charlie. And so it was interesting to see Big Finish having an impact on the TV show in that way, even though it wasn't obvious to the audience that's what was happening. But we learned from her that there's a room for everybody in this ever-changing hotel, which is, by the way, notice it's kind of an evil TARDIS.
Yeah.
It does things like the TARDIS, only with rearranging itself internally, only it's evil and twisted. And so there's a room for everybody, and when you see what's in your room, it has the thing you're most afraid of. And you don't know what that thing is going to be until you see it. But then once you see it, it's like, oh, it could never have been anything else. And that's the moment at which you're infected. And so that conceptually, I think, is fine. That's a scary concept. That's a useful horror concept. In the execution, I think it's kind of mixed. Like in one room, in Lucy's room, she goes into the room, and you're kind of compelled when you find your room to go into it. There's like a psychological compulsion. And when she goes into her room, it's a gorilla. It's a guy in a gorilla suit who chases her. And that's her worst fear. And she explains in voiceover that she was like terrified of this gorilla she read about in a book. And that's what's haunted her all her life. And I don't think that's particularly effective. I think, yes, a kid could have an irrational fear of a gorilla like this. That's fine. But I don't think it's going to be the person's deepest fear. And especially not into adulthood. I think the fears are going to be more profound. I think they do a little bit better when they show us Howie's fear. Howie is the nerdy blogger who thinks everything is a CIA conspiracy. And he sees a group of young women in a room, and they're chatting among themselves, and then they notice him and start denigrating him. So his fear is being humiliated by the opposite sex. And okay, that's better. That's better than the gorilla. You know, someone in his time of life could have that as rejection by the opposite sex is their deepest fear. Okay, that at least that's better. I don't know that it's really the root primal fear for anybody. I think anybody can probably think of scarier things than that, but then they can't all show us existential horror in every room. You know, they need to vary that a little bit. Another room has weeping angels, and it wasn't clear to me whose fear the weeping angels were. They kind of fake us out, making us think it's Amy at first, but then it turns out it's not her, although she does have a strong reaction to the weeping angels.
Yeah, it's supposed to be Gibbous, I guess, but I'm not sure why. It's not explained.
Yeah, because he doesn't seem to have a particular connection to them that they show us anyway. And we also get to see kind of the doctor's room, too, because he opens the door to a darkened room, and we get an extreme close-up of his eye, and we hear the cloister bell sounding, and he says, of course, who else? And later, they're going to reveal what that is. In The Day of the Doctor...
Time of the Doctor, it's revealed that what he sees is a crack in time. And when he says, oh, of course, who else? He's referring to the Time Lords, which would make his greatest fear the Time Lords, which I don't really buy. Because by that point in his arc, I mean, maybe by that point in his arc, he's gotten over his fear of the Time Lords, but it's hard to think of them as his greatest fear. I mean wouldn't companion death would be bigger in my mind? I was going to say, I mean, they demonstrate over and over that the Doctor's at his worst. The thing he hates the most is being without a companion and being alone. Yeah. And so, I would think it would be something like that. Yeah. But
that's what I figured it was himself. But
yeah. Of course, it was room number 11. Of course.
Yes. Yeah. So the idea is that there's this, and that they eventually put together, is there's this creature in the hotel, which is a Minotaur, And they link it to classic Who by saying it's a relative of the Nyman, which is from the episode Horns of the Nyman, even though the Nyman have nothing to do with this. They look kind of Minotaur-like, but they just shoot people with rays from their horns. They don't feed on fear. But apparently the Minotaur feeds on faith, and the idea is, but it has to be faith in a certain state. Mm-hmm. It's not just any faith. And so what the Minotaur does, it's been imprisoned by a group of people it used to terrify, but they didn't kill it, which is, of course, what you do with something like this. You just kill it. But instead, they've imprisoned it on this spaceship and allowed it to victimize other people and given it the ability to teleport other people to victimize, which makes no sense. So here's where the logic is starting to fall apart. And what it does is it confronts you with your greatest fear, forcing you to fall back on your faith, whatever faith you have. Not specifically religious faith. The Doctor makes that very clear. It can be other things. So in the case of John, the gambler, he has faith in luck. And in the case of Howie, he has faith in his conspiracy theories. Mm-hmm. And in the case of Amy, she has faith in the Doctor. And by eliciting an act of faith to deal with your fear, it brings your faith to the forefront of your consciousness, and that's when the Minotaur can start shaping it and twisting it into a worship of itself. So one of the recurring phrases in this episode is praise him. And so the characters, after they've been infected, will start, at first it's just occasionally, but they'll say, praise him. Kind of like Amy counting down in a previous episode. It's just randomly slipped in. And then when they're, and we'll get these reaction shots that are jump cuts between, or rapid cuts between the person looking scared and horrified and looking ecstatic. You know, like they're caught up in a religious rapture. And then eventually, when their faith is sufficiently mature, the Minotaur psychically feeds on them and they're just dead. Mm-hmm. And so one of the problems with this is it's stupid. This is one of the big problems, not the biggest, but one of the biggest problems I have with this is just dumb. Because they've defined faith so broadly that the concept has become incoherent. Rory, it turns out, has faith in nothing.
Nothing at all. Absolutely nothing.
Okay, I'm sorry. No, Rory, if you've defined faith this broadly, so it's not religious, everybody has to have faith in order to be able to function in life. Rory has faith in the laws of gravity. Rory has faith in the laws of chemistry. Rory has faith in the laws of medicine. Everybody has this general confidence in various things in order to function in life. And there's no rational criterion to distinguish faith in the law of gravity versus luck in gambling, or everything's a CIA conspiracy theory. In fact, I would say that with Howie and John and Rory, all three of them have more faith in the law of gravity than they do these other superficial things.
I would even say if Amy has faith in the Doctor enough for this to be called faith, Rory has repeatedly demonstrated
faith in Amy.
Faith in Amy. 2,000 years. 2,000 years he waited. That is faith.
Exactly.
So, yeah, that was dumb. That's one of the things I really disliked about was Rory's just sort of doesn't matter at all in that sense. It's like, oh, we have to have Rory here, so we're just going to say he doesn't have faith, and therefore we don't really need to have him do anything. Although Rory does get one good line, which is when he talks about Howie after Howie's dead, and he finds out, I forget what it is. He says he must have talked to Howie. He says, he'd just gone through therapy to get over a stammer, and he says not all victories are about saving the universe. And I'm like, yes, in New Who we have acknowledgement that we can have small victories over things that aren't about saving the universe.
Well, and there's another line actually with Howie and Rory where Howie's going on about the CIA thing, and they're in Norway, and this is where they smuggle people away, the U.S. government smuggle people away and all that. And Rory just says, amazing, you've come up with a theory even more insane than what's really happening.
Right, yes. That
so there are some good lines, but
And Howie's not wrong about doomsday shelters in Norway. I mean, that is where the global seed vault is.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
We also have them here in the United States as well for our
Raven
Just spread it out. So one of the things that comes up is the title of the episode is the God Complex, and then on the surface level, the God Complex is the Minotaur is like a god who is seeking faith, and the complex is the hotel. But Rita makes it more personal, and she identifies the Doctor as having a God complex, or we might say a savior complex, where he feels the need to save everyone and do everything, which is, in one sense, well, yeah, but that's because he's the most capable. He's lived for longer. He's got the knowledge and technology and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not sure what they were getting at with this, like this whole thing.
I can see this being part of the, the oncoming storm and all that, ego stuff that carried over from the 10th Doctor, where, the Doctor is the most important person in the room, just ask him type of thing,
I guess it might also be, given that he has a God complex that she identifies, and it's Amy's faith in him that endangers her. And so, she sort of worships, he's her her God in a small G sense. I guess maybe that's what we're sort of getting at there. I don't know. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's just to knock him down a notch.
Yeah.
That's the way I took it.
And I'm fine with knocking the Doctor down a notch. That's okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
The thing, and this is my big problem with this, my biggest, beyond the stupidity, is this and this, there may be more than one criticism here, but basically I find it sick and horrific the way this episode twists people's faith. Because even if they say, oh, faith can be anything, it can be in CIA theories and gambling and blah, 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 they're playing it as if it's religious. This is when they're doing the praise him thing and we see the rapid cuts between horror and rapture. That's religious. They're playing it as if it's religious faith. And this is, if you are a religious person, the thought of faith being twisted in this way is horrific. And I was horrified, not in the I can consume horror fiction sense, but I just am utterly repulsed by taking what someone holds sacred and twisting it in this way. And I don't want to see that done even in fiction. I don't want to see it done to a Muslim. I don't want to see it done to a Jew. I don't want to see it done to a Christian. I don't want to see it done to anybody, because whatever people hold most sacred should be respected and treated as sacred by other people. I mean, not in the sense of I believe in it, but in the sense of I understand, okay, let's say you're a Hindu. I understand the reverence you have for your gods, and I have reverence for the Christian God, and I would want you to respect that, and I therefore should treat your beliefs with equal respect, even in fiction. I shouldn't take the Hindu deities and have them killing you in this weird evil god rapture way. That would be disgusting and horrifying to a Hindu. It would be disgusting and horrifying to anybody of faith. So what this shows us is that the writer is not applying the golden rule. And there's one, he's doing something that's a fundamental violation of the audience, or at least the religious people in the audience. And that suggests that he himself, Toby Whithouse, I don't know if he is or not, but the way the episode is written strongly suggests he is not religious. And therefore, if you look at what happens in this episode, we've essentially got an evil god plot where the god of the episode, the Minotaur, is evil. And it's not just any god. I mean, this is not a glowing being in a robe with a beard or anything. This is a goat-hoofed, hairy-legged, horned man thing. Okay? That you can't get much more satanic than that. And so we have these people on the emotional, iconographic level. We have these people being forced to worship the devil in rapture, and then he kills them and eats their souls. And that is sick and disgusting, and certainly does not belong in a family show. Also, this is an atheistic fantasy because the ultimate solution is to kill the evil, hairy goat man demon by cutting off faith. So losing faith is the solution to the dilemma posed by the evil, satanic, horned god man thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and to top it off, we also elicit sympathy for the evil, satanic, horned man god thing.
Yeah.
As a poor creature on its own that we're supposed to feel sympathy for in the end as well.
It was trapped to this. It was trapped into doing this. It wanted to stop, but it couldn't. And, and of course, Jimmy, you mentioned that, religious faith, that this is an assault to religious faith. I mean, they go out of their way to explicitly put a religious person in, at least someone who's culturally Muslim, whether or not they actually are. We don't know if she practices, she did the prayers or anything like that, but she's explicitly Muslim, and that's not a culture. It's a religion.
Yeah. And I totally buy her line where she knows she's been infected. She knows she's about to die. The doctor is watching her over the hotel TV, closed circuit TV system. And she tells him to stop. She says, I want to be robbed of my faith in private. Mm-hmm. And it's like, absolutely. I don't want to see this on the screen either. This is totally meta, and I agree with you. I don't want this on my screen.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's funny that they would put that in there. And like as if acknowledging that what they're doing is bad. Yeah, it's kind of weird. And when the doctor tries to break Amy's faith in him, it's completely unconvincing. Why would I'm a jerk? I'm unreliable. I'm vain. Oh, I have no more faith in you, doctor. After all of the experiences we've had, suddenly I have no faith in you. It's just
Seven crushing Ace is played better.
Yeah. That's much more convincing. I mean, he turns her into an ant and steps on her. It's pretty bad. Right.
They also, it's very materialistic in the sense of faith is an energy. It's a specific emotional energy. The creature needs to, it's very materialistic, very not, it posits a worldview in which faith is not a real, the spiritual is not real, that we live in a universe without God. So I agree. It is as we talk about. Yeah, this may actually be the worst episode of Doctor Who overall for those reasons that you mentioned, Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so let's.
Yeah, and I don't like to overread into things. There's I saw a quote once by the Catholic fantasy novelist Tim Powers, where he was on a panel. And one of the other panelists was saying, well, the novel Dracula is really about the repressed fears of Victorian women. And Tim's response was, no, it's about a guy who drinks blood so he can live forever. I mean, don't believe me, read it, And I'm a big fan of taking things on surface value and not overly reading deep meanings into them. Yeah. But in this case, it's explicitly about religion, and so that just tells us, okay, so analyze the iconography in terms of religion, and we've got this evil goat man demon thing that people are worshiping against their will, and then it kills them. And the solution to the whole thing is losing your faith so that the god can die. And it's, okay, this is not overanalyzing. This is just what's there.
Yeah. Yeah, it's no coincidence that some of Toby Whithouse's some of his episodes are among the worst of Doctor Who, Modern Who. So yeah, I think that it's clear.
Yeah. So part of why I say this is the worst episode ever is, even though it's not badly made, it's because it's offensive. It's unlike anything else. I mean, Doctor Who can take on political subjects and has since the beginning. Especially in the Third Doctor's time, we had some political stories, and you can agree or disagree. There can be stories that are very slow moving. There can be stories that are badly made. But this is the one that I find absolutely offensive.
And there have been stories that dealt with religion and dealt with it either poorly or not poorly. But those are not offensive, even the ones that dealt with religion poorly or that we've disagreed with how they did it. But I see what you're saying, Jimmy. This really is offensive in the way that it completely crushes the idea of religion. It completely dismisses it, the idea of faith, real faith. Right. And yeah, I could see that. I agree with you.
And in a way that isn't fair-handed, because it's not about crushing people's faith in the law of gravity or stuff like that. It's specifically religious faith, even though they have dodges about gambling and conspiracy theories. It's really religious faith that's at the center of this.
Right. It'd be one thing if it was interesting if they'd done it like if it was about superstition, like believing in luck, or believing or superstition about the black cat and broken mirrors and all that sort of stuff. That would be a different sort of story. Where if it lived off of people's superstitions and beliefs and myths and that sort of thing, and that might have actually worked better. But they had something they wanted to do different.
Could have had an episode filled with 1930s and 40s Universal horror iconography.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's a scene at the end which sort of, it feels almost like tacked on. Not in the sense of like it's poorly done, but
I think it is tacked on.
Yeah. Well, I think it's to advance the overall arc of the series, that this is a Stephen Moffat addition to the story, is how it feels. Where the Doctor brings Amy and Rory to London, present day, quote unquote, present day of that time, and gives them a house and a car, which Rory's favorite car. Like he's some. The
red
Doctor
convertible, sporty red convertible,
nice classic Jag. And he's going to leave them there, and he says, "I'm not leaving forever. I'll be back." And he does come back, but their time as a couple living in the TARDIS is over. That's clear at this point. And he says, "I'm doing this to save you." And I guess this experience has convinced him that, despite all the other dangers that they've survived, this was the one that's convinced him that he needs to leave them behind.
Yeah, it's. I mean, it is a harrowing experience. I mean, and early on, after John dies. John is the first to die. He says, "Nobody else dies today, really." And it's like, okay, then everybody dies except the primary companions. And the mole guy. He also gets to live. Yeah,
Mole Man lives.
But you can say, well, why would this one be the one? Well, maybe because it's the worst episode ever. But I don't think that's their reason. But if the Doctor is at some point going to say, "I'm going to put y'all off the TARDIS for your own safety," it would be after a dangerous incident where lots of people die.
Mm. Has he ever left companions by setting them up with a house and a car and a life?
Not in the TV series.
Okay, all right.
And sometimes he's actually left them off in the wrong place instead of their house.
That happened to Sarah Jane. Yeah, this isn't even Croydon.
So, okay. So
now there is kind of I don't know if it was an intentional spoiler on Stephen Moffat's part, or it was just a clever line that he ended up playing out. But he says to Amy, "What do you want, me standing over your grave?" And of course, that's exactly what he does after they get zapped to the past with the Weeping Angels. He's standing over their grave.
Right.
I should mention, so in Classic Who, he didn't have many opportunities to set up companions with a comfortable life in this way because he didn't have good control of the TARDIS. Mm-hmm. He couldn't just point it where he wants it to go and have it get there reliably.
Mm.
But he did. He would try to arrange good drop-off points for companions, like Victoria, for example, ends up with this similar kind of family that can take care of her in the Second Doctor's time.
Right. Yeah, Mel going off with.
Well, that was Mel's choice. That wasn't the Doctor.
No, yeah. In fact, I think I haven't seen it yet, but Perry ends up in a bad place too.
Yeah,
we're coming to that one here soon.
That's our next Sixth Doctor. The original Perry ending is something to see.
Yeah,
don't spoil yourself if you haven't yet, Dom.
Yeah. I won't. I'll save myself from seeing that. All right. Anything left to say about this episode? I think that we've said a lot. Anything left, Father
you
Cory?
know, I will one say about the Doctor, he does have a little bit of style because the house is TARDIS blue. At least the door is.
The door is, yeah.
Light blue with TARDIS blue. Yeah, I think Jimmy pretty much said everything that needed to be said about this one.
Okay.
I mean, ugh.
Jimmy, anything?
How do I hate thee? Let me count the ways.
Yeah.
Right. All right, let's wrap things up. I want to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secrets of Doctor Who, including Pat S., Joseph S., Father Terrence D., Anusha M., and Nate F. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secrets of Doctor Who and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edits the show for us every week. So that's it from us. What did you think of the God Complex? Do you have a different opinion, or has your opinion been changed by the things that we talked about today? Let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com or the Secrets of Doctor Who Facebook page, or send us an email to drwho@sqpn.com. We'll be back next time when we'll be going right back to the first Doctor's time. We're going to be discussing the Web Planet.
Yay! What a great palate cleanser after this.
Until then, Jimmy Aiken, thank you for joining me and sharing the Secrets of Doctor Who.
Good riddance.
Father Cory Stiga, thank you as well.
Thanks, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Doctor Who on StarQuest. And remember, she'll say that we can't accept it because it's too extravagant, and we'll always feel a crippling sense of obligation. It's a risk I'm willing to take.
Right. This is going to be fun.